Guys, Nitro here. It's January 15th, 2023 at about 9:15 in the morning. This is when I begin. For a while now, I've been wanting to make the old Firebird faster. You've seen it on the channel a couple times before, you know, fixing the odometer, doing a few little things like that, showing off the modifications I've made to it. Just mostly little stuff, mostly interior. And I've decided that I want to LS swap it, put a turbo on it, and Ford 8.8 rear end, roll cage, all that stuff. I know it sounds like I'm going full race car, but it's not. It's going to be still going to have cruise control, still going to have air conditioning and heat, still going to have, you know, all of the stuff that it has now that makes it a comfortable driver that I can hop in and go anywhere I want to. I've already purchased a rear end and purchased some brake parts for it and stuff. It's Ford 8.8 out of a 99 Explorer. It's got disc brakes and 373 gears. And today I'm going to be removing the rear end out of this car so that I can look at the brackets and either transfer them to the new rear end or I can make new ones, because I'm not going to do a back half on this car. I'm going to keep factory style suspension so that I can race in daily driver classes. And later in the year, when the car's done, I'm going to have videos of us going to races and hopefully me kicking ass. All right. Well, that took a little while. I didn't cut anything, so I had to, you know, unbolt everything, because I'm going to try to reuse everything I can, like the parking brake lines, obviously, where the hydraulic line comes out right there. Got it out. Got it in the back of the truck. I'm about to take it to the house where I have all of my welding equipment and stuff, and start transferring brackets from this rear end to the 8.8, and I also need to measure, because I think I have to shorten the 8.8. So I've done a fair bit of work. This is the Ford 8.8 that I bought. I cut right here the end off of it so I could measure the inside diameter of it and order some more material so that I can extend it like this. And I'm going to put a sleeve in it. The outside diameter is 3 1/4 inches. The inside diameter is 2 7/8. And I've ordered a 9-inch sleeve of 2 7/8 by 1/4 inch wall thickness, because that's the only thing I could find. It's kind of pricey, but it should be very strong whenever I go to put it back together. And what I'm going to do is basically make the passenger side exactly as long as the driver's side, and I'll be able to use 2 driver's side axles in both sides. And because this rear end has a 1-inch offset pinion, and the factory rear end also has a 1-inch offset pinion, after I extend this rear end, it will be about 5/8 of an inch wider than a factory rear end, which shouldn't really affect it that much. Each wheel is going to poke out about 1/4 of an inch more. I think that would be 5/16 more. So anyway, basically what I've done to get my brackets is I cut. This is the bracket that goes over here on the driver's side. It has the panhard bar mount and one of the spring perches. It's very important to get this one in the right spot, because none of the arms on this car are adjustable in the rear. And I know there's companies that make and sell adjustable arms, and at some point I might make my own adjustable arms or buy the adjustable arms and put on here. But for now, I'm going to try to reuse all the factory stuff just for a little while. So it's very important to get these brackets in the exact same position. So before I cut this one off, I measured. I got the center of the pinion, which is marked right here, a little dot. I got the center of the pinion on this one, which is marked there and there. And I measured over and lined it up using a square and some string, and did the same thing over here. Measured over using a square and some string, and made a mark on. You can see 2 Sharpie marker marks. There's one right there, and there's the other one on the rear end, and then lined it up. I actually ground my mark off and had to remember that we made one mark to the center of the spring perch, so I just measured that again and then marked it. But that's how I got the left and right. Now, forward and backward doesn't matter as much, and I had to remove a good bit of material at the bottom just to radius this out, because this is a little bit more than. This is 3 1/4 inches outside diameter, like I said. And then this one is like 2 1/2, just above 2 1/4, whatever. So I had to scoot it in more, but that shouldn't matter as much. I'm hoping we'll see, I guess. But then what I did you know, before I did anything, before I cut anything off of that rear end, I zeroed it out. That angle finder is at 0. I did the same thing over here using this jack stand and pushing it in the dirt. And I set the angle finder right here flat on this. Got this rear end to 0 degrees. And then I took pictures with that magnetic angle finder, the digital one, on the face of all of the brackets. And I took a picture with it on the face of all of the brackets so that I could take note of the clocking position. By clocking position, I mean like this. And so I just referenced it, and this one was set to be at 1.9. And as you can see, it's flipping between 1.8 and 1.7, which, you know, 0.1 degree is not going to matter that much. Or it shouldn't. It shouldn't. I could be wrong. So I just tack welded it for now, and I'm not going to fully weld anything until the rear end is completely assembled, and I put it in the car, and I can put a jack under it, and it moves up and down, and nothing binds up, and it seems to be centered, and the alignment checks out, like all of that. Because if I need to make an adjustment, I don't want to have to cut all of my welds off. So I'm just tacking it up. I've done a little bit of work over here, and I forgot to record. So I looked around. Nobody in my area sells DOM, which is drawn over mandrel, because this isn't pipe. This is like flat steel that they use a hydraulic press to form into a tube. And nobody sells drawn over mandrel around my area, so I looked it up online, and there's a company called Speedy Metals where you can order certain lengths of material. And I ordered a 4-inch piece and then cut it down to exactly 3 inches, because they said sometimes it'll be an 1/8 of an inch off either way. So I ordered a 4-inch piece of the 3 1/4 outside diameter, 2 7/8 inside diameter. And then I also ordered a 9-inch sleeve of 2 7/8 outside diameter that was 1/4 inch wall thickness. And so it goes from about 3 inches over from this cut here to 3 inches over here on the inside of there to sleeve it, to make it very, very strong. So after I weld all the way around it, I'm gonna drill probably 1/2 inch hole in either 4 or 3 places, here, there, and there, and I'm going to plug weld the sleeve to the tube. And I didn't video me putting the tube in or anything, the sleeve, but what I had to do with it whenever I got it, it was 4/1000ths of an inch too wide to fit inside of the tube. So I bought a cylinder hone and honed out the inside of the tube, because there's a little weld on the inside you got to grind out with a die grinder, and then take the hone and just smooth it up. And I did that to all 3 of these pieces, honed them, slicked them up, and then I put the tube in a vise and used a flat disc on a grinder over here, just going back and forth very carefully, and just worked it until it would slide in and out at room temperature with the other pieces of metal. I didn't want to do it. I could have probably just stuck the sleeve in a freezer and then heated all this stuff up with a torch and got it pretty hot, and it would have slid in there, because whenever metal gets hot, it expands, and whenever metal cools or gets cold, it shrinks. It goes with any material. But if I did that, whenever it all returned to room temperature, it would expand and contract, and then it'd be stuck, and I wouldn't be able to adjust the clocking of it or in and out in case something wasn't quite right. And so I did it the right way. I put it together where it could slide a little bit and move, and then I tack welded. I held a straight edge along the top of this and along the sides, and the axle spins. This is the driver's side axle, and as you can see, it's in the passenger side. If I took this cover off, it has the C-clip on there. I took 2 spider gears out so it could just spin, because the pin that goes through the middle is right here. So, but the axle spins, I'm going to pull on it just a little bit. It spins really nicely. It lines up perfectly. It's like 20 and a 32nd of an inch from the back side of this flange to this flange, and over here it's exactly 20 inches from this flange to this flange. And so it's off by maybe a 32nd of an inch too long on this side, but that really shouldn't matter. So driver's side axles will now work on both sides of the Ford 8.8 rear end. But what I'm doing to weld this, to keep it straight, because I don't have any fancy jigs or nothing, I tack welded in 4 spots, equally distanced from each other around. But the way I did it is you tack weld on the top, and then you tack weld on the bottom directly under it. Tack weld on the top, tack weld on the bottom, tack weld on the left, tack weld on the right. And you do that, And then once it's all tacked up and it's still straight with a straight edge on all 4 corners and the axle still spins nice, then you take and you do welds, and this is called quartering it. My brother told me this. And you weld from one tack to the other tack in a constant weld. And then you go to the other side, the opposite quadrant, and you weld one tack to the other tack. And then I'm doing this alternating on this side and this side because I don't want to get it really, really hot and warp it. So I'm going to do this one and then this one. I'm letting it cool right now. And I'm going to come back, I'm going to do this one. And then I'm going to do the one down there. And I'm going to do this one. And then I'm going to do that one. And then I'm actually going to come over it because if you look, the weld didn't fully fill in. So I'm going to come back and lay 2 more beads on top. So I'm going to go to here and then I'm going to go there. But I'm going to do it in quadrants to try to keep each area of the metal relatively cool. I don't want one spot getting really, really hot because whenever it expands and then contracts, it's not going to be straight. So you just want to take your time and do it right. So it seems like it's going to work. It should be very, very strong. And I did cut it in a spot where the spring perch should mount right about here, and that will gusset it. So, all right, I got it fully welded up now, and you can kind of see what I'm talking about of the stacked welds. So I originally had one weld in the middle, and then I did one to the right and then one to the left, and I quartered it just the same. And the axle still spins pretty freely. I mean, I'm barely pushing, and you can see how easily it's spinning. So, I think it's going to work. I'm going to let this cool a little bit, and I'm going to cut the brackets off of this one. I'm going to double check my measurements on where those are in relation to the pinion and write everything down and then transfer those brackets. This rear end, tack weld them in place, and then I should be able to order 2 driver's side chromoly axles. I'm going to get some from Mosier, I think. That are 5x4 3/4 bolt pattern, so I can use my factory wheels for a little bit longer until I order some new ones. And then the only thing left to do is make a torque arm mount, which if you look at this one, it's just 2 big things with holes in it on the side of the housing up by the pinion. So I got to do that. I'm going to make a torque arm mount, and then I also have to weld around this seam. So you can see here I have the spring perch tack welded on and the shock mount and trailing arm mount tack welded on. And now if you're doing this exact swap, whenever you remove the trailing arm mount, I measured from this point to this point here and made sure, before I took them off, and made sure that that width was the exact same whenever I put it back on. Because whenever you get these off, the best way I found to do it was to use these 2 tools. A right angle die grinder with a cutting wheel, and then a regular die grinder with some sort of a bit like that. And you just kind of get in here and very carefully try to cut the weld and grind it down as much as possible. And then use a hammer to hit it this way and hit it that way and hit it that way. And just try to fatigue the metal until it breaks. There's no way to really cut it all the way off, especially if you leave the drum brakes on. I want to leave everything on and sealed up because I plan on using this rear end in a future project at some point. You can see here I grinded the weld down on the top so that my perch could be flat to the rear end, and I did the same thing along the side here. What I'm about to do here now is I'm going to drill holes, one here, one there, and do the same thing on the back side. And I'm going to drill through this tubing until I hit the inner sleeve. And then I'm going to plug weld in those 3 spots. And the purpose of that is to guarantee that that sleeve cannot move. I just did all the plug weld. Basically what I did to do that, 3/16, I drilled my pilot hole, and I could actually feel whenever it got through this material and went into the other. And then I drilled into the other material about 1/8 of an inch. So I'd say to make it the hole minimum 1/4 inch deep. Just so you drill into the sleeve on the inside. And then after I did my pilot holes, I came back with a 1/2 inch drill bit and just drilled until the pilot holes were gone. You'll feel the change in it again. It drills really good with a pilot hole, and then once it bottoms out, it slicks up. And using cutting oil the whole time. Clean it off. Put some brake clean or something on there to get the oil off, so your weld is good. Then get it good and dry. And then whenever you do a plug weld, You start in the middle and you build up your puddle, and then you spiral outwards, and you just go real slow so that your puddle is really big and it gets in the middle. And then you just come on and on and on and on until you get to the top, and then you do one final pass, and then I finish it off in the middle. The axle still spins really good, really free. So the tube is solid. I got the rear end up under the car. I need to make my bracket for this rear end for the torque arm mount, and I've got the rear end in here, and it's supported, it's bolted in, it's not going to fall out or nothing, and I have it, you can barely see, it's really hard to tell. That's as close to zero as I think it can be. So the rear end is sitting at 0 degrees, the torque arm is just sitting on the jack, kind of sort of where I think it needs to be. There is plenty of room in between the torque arm and the body all the way up to there. Plenty of clearance inside of the torque arm. Plenty of room for the drive shaft to bolt to the rear end housing. I've got the rear end back out of it. I put it over here on some jack stands, and I have the torque arm out of the car. Easiest way to get that out is just to remove the nut on the top. Anyway, I took the top nut off. The clamshell comes open, and then this can come out. This is what I've got so far for brackets. I already drilled my holes, and that lines up and goes on. But what I did, see, this one's welded on the top and welded under the bottom there. And then this one is welded all along on the bottom. Basically what I did to put that in the car, to make the brackets, is I took some cardboard like this, just some single ply cardboard, and cut up some pieces and laid under the car with a pair of scissors while the rear end was under there, and set to 0 degrees and as far up as I could get it to go. And I just cut with the scissors and kept test fitting it until I had a piece of cardboard that was roughly like, I had plenty of room around the holes. It would go over and the cardboard would go in there and lay perfectly flat and not bind on anything, and kind of fit on the rear end housing. First thing I'm going to do is make another template and make a piece of metal that's going to go down here, down, over, and probably stop, I don't know, right around in here somewhere. I don't want to get this part really, really hot because I know there's a seal right there. So I'm probably just going to stop welding right about here and just kind of box that in right about here. And then I'm going to take and run a piece on the front right here all the way down to there and box that in. And then I'll box in a piece in the middle here. And I'm going to leave it open, mainly so I can get to this fill plug. I radius this so that you can get to the drain plug really easily. You can get a ratchet in there super easy and pull the drain plug out and get a funnel in there to fill it. I welded it along the front and the side, and then over here, just like I said. And I feel like that'll be plenty strong enough. I also got in here and cut this out, section that out, because if you look down the hole, before it was like in the way or whatever, you can see now, you can see through the other hole, and it's not in the way, or it shouldn't be in the way. It's bolted in, sitting level. I have nothing tight. The rear end moves easily. It's not binding. And I'll go back up. It's not binding left or right at all. I've done it a couple times and just watched it. Everything looks fine. So I have no reason to believe that this isn't perfect. I got a problem. Can you see it? Do you see the problem? That spring ain't supposed to be angled like that. I don't think it's got to be 100% perfect. The easiest way to fix it would be to cut all my tack welds and remove more material here, and then just push that forward basically. I have the panhard bar mount over here, and if you look very carefully, if I line it up, you can clearly see that that's not lined up. And I'm about to take the bolt out of it and see if it just hangs straight or if it hangs at an angle. Now the bolt is out of it, and you can clearly see like it wants to hang perfectly straight down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure from the edge of that to the edge of this, or the inside edge of this to the outside edge of this, and that's basically going to tell me how much material I need to remove off the front and slide this forward. The other one isn't nearly as bad, so I'll probably move it forward 1/4 of an inch just because this spring perch will be super easy to remove and do, and there's nothing else attached to it. But I think I need to remove about a 1/2 inch of material off the driver's side perch and maybe 1/4 inch off this side. I got one side of the axle tube welded up. I went ahead and moved the perches forward about 1/4 of an inch on that side and almost 1/2 of an inch on that side, and it helped a little bit. It didn't make that big of a difference, but I think the spring is supposed to have some angle forward, because whenever you raise the rear end, it does like this. Whenever it's hanging, it's like that. Whenever you raise it, it kind of levels back out. So about 3 or 4 degrees it changes whenever you raise it. So I feel like whenever it's underweight, it should be straight now. It wouldn't have been before. It's much happier for sure. But I went ahead and fully welded all the way around at least one side on every contact point of all of the brackets. And I wanted to get that done first. And then I got this axle tube hot. And the way I did it, I did 3 sections. So I did a top section here, then this section, then I did like the bottom section, and I welded it, just trying to make like a 1/4 inch to 3/8 inch wide bead, just good penetration. I got it really hot with my MAP gas torch, held it on the cast part for maybe a minute or two, moving it back and forth, a minute or two straight, until I felt it was very hot. And then I welded it, and then after welding it, came right back around and just made massive weld beads with the welder turned up pretty high. So I'm very confident that that's going to hold. Got it all welded up, and I wrapped the welding blanket around it, and then I wrapped it up tight around the whole thing, and then I wrapped this moving blanket around it, because if I touched the welding blanket, I could still feel heat in the welding blanket. So I wanted to insulate it even more. It's kind of cold outside, probably mid-40s or whatever, and I really want it to just, like, take a couple of hours to get to where it's, you know, room temperature. The sway bar is, I took the factory brackets, you can see there's factory brackets. I welded up the little hole that it originally had, and I welded about 3/4 of an inch of metal on the end of the same thickness. And I grinded it down smooth, and I drilled some holes that were the same size as these little plates here. And these plates came on my new U-bolts. I got them from Ace Hardware. They are the right size for the axle housing. And those U-bolts came with these plates. I welded them to these brackets, and then I cut the ears off and just filed them down until they fit onto the axle nicely. All right, as you can see, the rear end is painted and installed. When you buy your rear end, make sure and get it from a Sport Track, because those are the ones that come with the traction lock rear end. I messed up and got it from just a regular Explorer Sport, and it came with an open differential, so I had to change that out. That was extra $250. But anyway, this concludes the video of how to swap a Ford 8.8 into your Firebird or Camaro and keep the factory style suspension. You see I have the trailing arm, the shock, the other thing. I mean, it's a Ford 8.8 in a Camaro that I did myself. I think I've got $1,700 in it at the moment, plus a whole lot of work. Anyway, if you want to see more stuff like this, subscribe, hit the like button, and let me know what you think down below. Thanks.